The Beacon's Second Reader by James Hiram Fassett. A Good Play. We built a ship upon the stairs, all made of the back bedroom chairs, and filled it full of sofa pillows, to go a-sailing on the billows. We took a saw and several nails, and water in the nursery pails, and Tom said, "Let us also take an apple and a slice of cake," which was enough for Tom and me to go a-sailing on till tea. We sailed along for days and days, and had the very best of plays, but Tom fell out and hurt his knee, so there was no one left but me. Dick Whittington. Dick Whittington was a poor little boy who lived in the country. His father and mother were both dead. Poor little Dick was always willing to work, but sometimes there was no work for him to do, so he often had nothing to eat. Now Dick was a bright boy. He kept both ears open to hear what was said around him. He had heard many times about the great city of London. Men said that in this great city the people were rich. Dick had even heard that the streets were paved with gold. How I should like to visit that great city, thought Dick, for I could pick up gold from the streets. Dick had earned a little money, so one day he set out to walk to London. He walked and walked and walked, but London was a long way from his home. At last a man with a wagon came along. He was a kind man, and he gave Dick a ride. "Where are you going?" asked Dick. "I'm going to London," said the man. "You are very good to give me a ride. I'm going there too," said Dick. It was dark when they reached London. That night Dick slept in a barn with the horses. The next morning he looked for the golden stones in the streets. He looked and looked, but he could only find dust and dirt. There were many, many people in London, and Dick thought that he could soon find something to do. He wandered around the streets, seeking for work. He asked many people, but no one wanted the poor little country boy. As Dick had no money for food, he soon became very, very hungry. At last he grew so weak that he fell down before the door of a great house. Here the cook found him and began to beat him with a stick. "Run away, you lazy boy," she cried. Poor Dick tried to rise, but he was so faint from want of food that he could not stand. Just then the owner of the house, Mr. Fitzwarren, came up. He took pity on the poor boy and ordered the cook to give him some food. Then he turned to Dick and said, "If you wish to work, you may help the cook in the kitchen. You will find a bed in the attic." Dick thanked Mr. Fitzwarren again and again for his kindness. The cook was very cross to Dick and whipped him almost every day. His bed in the attic was only a pile of old rags. He soon found that there were many rats and mice in the attic. They ran over his bed and made so much noise every night that he could not sleep. "I wish I had a cat," thought Dick, for she could eat up these rats and mice. One day Dick earned a penny by blacking a man's shoes. "I will try to buy a cat with this penny," thought Dick. So he started out and soon met a woman with a large cat. "Will you sell me that cat?" said Dick. "I will give you this penny for her." "You are a good boy," said the woman, "and you may have the cat for a penny, for I know you will treat her kindly." That night Dick's bed was free from rats, and Miss Puss had a good supper. Dick began to love his cat dearly. Now Mr. Fitzwarren had many ships which sailed to distant lands. When a ship sailed, Mr. Fitzwarren let everyone in his house send something on it. The things were sold, and when the ship came back, each person had the money for what he had sent. One of the ships was ready to sail. Everyone in the house except Dick had sent something. "What is Dick going to send in the ship?" said Mr. Fitzwarren. "Oh, that boy has nothing to send," said the cross cook. "It is true," said poor Dick. "I have nothing but my dear cat." "Well, then you must send your cat," said Mr. Fitzwarren. How lonely poor Dick was without Puss. The cook made fun of him for sending a cat on the ship. At last Dick became so unhappy that he made up his mind to run away. He started early in the morning, before anyone in the house was up. He had gone but a short way when he heard the sound of the great 6 bells of Bow. As they rang, ding, dong, they seemed to say, "Turn back, Whittington, Lord Mayor of London." "It is strange that the bell should speak to me," said Dick, "but if I am to be Lord Mayor of London, I will gladly turn back." So he ran back to the house of Mr. Fitzwarren. "I hope they have not missed me," said Dick, as he gently opened the door and stole softly in. Dick's cat was taken across the ocean. The ship sailed and sailed until at last it came to a distant country. Now the king and queen of this country were very rich. When the captain was asked to show his goods before them, he was very glad indeed to do so. The king and queen first gave the captain a great feast. Gold and silver dishes filled with food were brought in. When these dishes were placed upon the table, an army of rats came out. There were white rats and black rats and brown rats and big rats and little rats. At once they fell upon the food and ate it nearly all up. "Why do you let the rats do this?" asked the captain. "Alas, we cannot help ourselves," said the king. "I would give half my kingdom to be rid of them." Then the captain thought of Dick Whittington's cat. "I have an animal which will rid you of them," said the captain. "Pray, bring it in at once," said the queen. What fun Dick's cat had killing the rats and mice in the king's palace. "We must buy that little animal," said the queen. "I do not care how much she may cost." The captain could hardly carry all the jewels and gold that the king gave him for the cat. Then the ship with Dick's money came back to London, and the captain told the story to Mr. Fitzwarren. "We must take these jewels and all this gold at once to Mr. Whittington," said the honest man. "He is no longer a poor boy, for this has made him rich." They found Dick in the kitchen, blacking the stove. "Come with me at once into the parlor," said Mr. Fitzwarren. Then the bags of gold and jewels were piled at Dick's feet. "See what your cat has brought you," said Mr. Fitzwarren. "You are now a rich man, and may yet be Lord Mayor of London." And it is true that after Dick Whittington became a man, he was made Lord Mayor of London. The New Moon. Dear mother, how pretty the moon looks tonight. She was never so cunning before. Her two little horns are so sharp and so bright. I hope she'll not grow any more. If I were up there with you and my friends, I'd rock in it nicely, you'd see. I'd sit in the middle and hold by both ends. Oh, what a bright cradle 'twould be. I would call to the stars to keep out of the way, lest we should rock over their toes. And then I would rock till the dawn of the day, and see where the pretty moon goes. And there we would stay in the beautiful skies, and through the bright clouds we would roam. We would see the sun set and see the sun rise, and on the next rainbow come home. Briar Rose. A long time ago there lived a king and queen who were very, very sad because they had no children. One day when the queen was resting near a spring, a frog crept out of the water and said to her, "You shall have your wish. Within a year you shall have a little girl." What the frog said came true. The queen had a little child who was so beautiful that the king gave a party in her honor. He wished to invite all the wise women in the land, for these wise women could grant fairy gifts to his little child. There were 13 of them, but only 12 were invited, as the king had only 12 golden plates. After the dinner was over, the wise women in turn arose from the table and named their fairy gifts to the little princess. The first gave to her goodness, the second beauty, the third riches, and so on, up to the last. Before the 12th wise woman could speak, in walked the 13th. This woman was in a great rage because she had not been invited. She cried in a loud voice, "When the princess is 15 years old, she shall prick her finger with a spindle and shall fall down dead." At these words everyone turned pale with fright. The 12th wise woman, who had not yet spoken, now came up and said, "I could not stop this woman's evil words. I can only make them less harsh. The king's child shall not die, but a deep sleep shall fall upon her, in which she shall stay 100 years. The little princess was so beautiful, so kind, and so good that no one who knew her could help loving her. As she grew older, the king and queen began to feel very unhappy, for they could not help thinking of what was to happen to their dear little daughter. They ordered all the spindles in the kingdom to be burned. Now, as it happened, on the very day that the princess was 15 years old, the king and queen were away from home. The princess was quite alone in the castle, and she ran about over the palace, looking in at rooms and halls just as her fancy led her. At last she came to an old tower at the top of a winding stair. She saw a little door. In the lock was a rusty key. When she turned it, the door flew open. There, in a small room, sat an old woman with her spindle, spinning flax. "Good morning," said the princess. "Do tell me what that funny thing is that jumps about so." And then she held out her hand to take the spindle. It came about just as the fairy had foretold. The princess pricked her finger with the spindle. At once she fell upon a bed which was near, and lay in a deep sleep as if dead. This sleep came not only upon the princess, but spread over the whole castle. The king and queen, who had just come home, fell asleep, and all their lords and ladies with them. The horses went to sleep in the stable, the dogs in the yard, the doves on the roof, the flies on the wall. Yes, even the fire that burned in the fireplace grew still and slept. The meat stopped roasting before the fire. The cook in the kitchen was just going to box the ears of the kitchen boy, but her hand dropped and she sank to sleep. Outside the castle the wind was still, and upon the trees not a leaf stirred. In a short time there sprung up around the castle a hedge of thorn bushes. Year by year the hedge grew higher and higher, until at last nothing of the castle could be seen above it, not even the roof, nor the chimneys, nor the flag on the tower. As years went by, the story of the Sleeping Beauty was told all over the kingdom. Many kings' sons came and tried to get through the hedge of thorns, but this they could not do. The sharp thorns seemed to have hands which held the young men fast. After many, many years, a prince came from a far-off kingdom. He heard the story of the castle and its Sleeping Beauty. He knew what danger lay in the great hedge of thorn bushes, but the young prince was brave, and he was not to be turned back. "I am not afraid. I will go out and see this beautiful briar rose," he said. It happened that the 100 years of the magic spell had just ended. The day had come when the sleeping princess was to wake up again. As the prince came to the hedge of thorn bushes, it was in full bloom and covered with beautiful red flowers. There, through the thorn bushes, lay a wide road. Soon the prince came to the gates of the castle. He found the horses and dogs lying asleep on the ground. The doves sat on the roof with their heads under their wings. He went into the castle. Even the flies on the wall still slept. Near the throne lay the king and queen, while all around were the sleeping lords and ladies. The whole castle was so still that he could hear his heart beat. The prince went on from room to room until he came to the old tower. Going up the winding stair, he saw the little door. A rusty key was in the lock, and the door was half open. There before him lay the sleeping princess. The prince bent down and gave her a kiss. As he did so, the Sleeping Beauty opened her eyes. With her the whole castle awoke. The king waked up, and the queen, and all the lords and ladies. The horses in the stable stood up and shook themselves. The dogs jumped about and wagged their tails. The doves on the roof lifted their heads and flew into the fields. The flies on the wall began to buzz. The fire in the kitchen began to burn. The meat began to roast. The cook boxed the ears of the kitchen boy so that he ran off crying. The hedge of thorn bushes around the castle dried up and blew away. Then the prince married the beautiful princess, and they lived happily ever after. The Baker Boys and the Bees. Long years ago, many cities had great stone walls around them. The walls were built to keep out enemies, for in those days cities often went to war with one another. The city of Andernach had around it one of these great walls. There was only one gateway into the city, and this gateway was guarded by strong iron doors. Just behind the doors lived a gatekeeper, who did nothing but open and shut the gates. He watched them well. No one could come in who was not friendly to the city. The gates were not opened very often. Some days they were not opened at all, so the gatekeeper had much spare time. "I am very fond of honey," thought he. "I think I will buy a few hives of bees. I can place the hives on top of the wall. There nobody will trouble them." Soon there were rows of beehives on the top of the wall over the gate. It happened that, not far away, there was another walled city named Linz. The people of Linz were the enemies of the people of Andernach. They were always watching each other and fought when they could get a chance. Now the people of Linz planned to attack and capture the city of Andernach. They called their wisest men together to see how the attack should be made. Many plans were talked over. At length an old man said, "Men of Linz, you know that the men of Andernach are lazy. They like to lie late in their beds. If we attack the city at sunrise, we shall capture it before they can get their eyes open." This plan seemed wise to the people of Linz, and an army was soon ready to march against the city of Andernach. One dark night the army crept softly toward the walls of the sleeping city. The only people who rose early in Andernach were the bakers. They had to have fresh bread ready for breakfast. After their work was done, the bakers used to have a morning nap, but the baker boys had to stay awake and watch the loaves of bread. Two of these boys, named Hans and Fritz, were fast friends and were always together. One morning, just at sunrise, Hans said to Fritz, "Let us creep upon the wall over the gatekeeper's house. I think we can find some honey. The old gatekeeper is asleep. He will not hear us." The two boys crept softly up the stairs. They soon reached the top of the wall. "Did you hear that noise?" whispered Fritz. "Yes, it must be the old gatekeeper," said Hans in a low voice. "No, it seems to come from over the wall," said Fritz. The two boys crawled to the edge of the wall and carefully looked over. There stood the army of Linz. A ladder was placed against the wall. The soldiers would soon mount over the gate into the city. What was to be done? There was no time to wake the people. What could two boys do against an army? In an instant Fritz thought of the beehives. Ah, the bees were awake if the people were not. Each boy seized a hive and bore it carefully to the edge of the wall. Then with a strong push, down tumbled hives, honey, and bees upon the heads of the enemy. Such buzzing, such stinging, such shouting as arose. The boys ran down the stairs to the city hall. The old bell ringer was aroused by the cries. Soon the wild clang of the bell awoke the people of Andernach. Armed men ran to the city gate, but the bees had done their work well. There was no need for soldiers. The army of Linz was running away. Over the great gate the people of Andernach placed a statue of the two baker boys, whose quick wit had saved the city. Falling snow. See the pretty snowflakes falling from the sky. On the wall and housetops, soft and thick they lie. On the window ledges, on the branches bare, now how fast they gather, filling all the air. Look into the garden, where the grass was green, covered by the snowflakes, not a blade is seen. Now the bare black bushes, all look soft and white, every twig is laden, what a pretty sight. Little Goody Two-Shoes. All the world must know that Two-Shoes was not her real name. No, her father's name was Meanwell, and he was for many years a well-to-do farmer. While Marjorie, for that was her real name, was yet a little girl, her father became very poor. He was so poor that at last he and Marjorie's mother and Marjorie and her little brother were all turned out of doors. They did not have a roof to cover their heads. Marjorie's father felt so unhappy that at last he died, and only a few days later Marjorie's mother died too. Poor little Marjorie and her brother were left alone in the wide world. Their sorrow would have made you pity them, but it would have done your heart good to see how fond they were of each other. They always went about hand in hand, and when you saw one you were sure to see the other. Look at them in the picture. They were both very ragged, and though Tommy had 2 shoes, Marjorie had but 1. They had nothing, poor little things, to live upon but what kind people gave to them. Each night they lay on the hay, in just such a barn as you see here. Mr. Smith was a very good man who lived in the town where little Marjorie and Tommy were born. Although he was a poor man, he took the children home to live with him. "They shall not want for food nor for a bed to sleep in while I live," he said. Mr. Smith had a friend who was a very wealthy man. When he heard the story about Marjorie and Tommy, this man gave Mr. Smith some money to buy little Marjorie a new pair of shoes and Tommy a new suit of clothes. The gentleman who had given the money for Marjorie's new shoes and Tommy's new clothes wished to take Tommy with him to London to make a sailor of him. When the time came for Tommy to go, both children began to cry. They kissed each other 100 times. At last Tommy wiped away Marjorie's tears and said, "Don't cry, little sister, for I will come home to you again and bring you beautiful clothes and much money." That night Marjorie went to bed weeping for her dear little brother. It was the first time they had ever been parted. The next morning the shoemaker came in with Marjorie's new shoes. She put them on in great glee and ran out to Mrs. Smith, crying, "2 shoes, 2 shoes, see Goody 2 Shoes." This she did to all the people she met, so that soon she was known far and wide as Goody 2 Shoes. Dear little Marjorie saw how good and wise Mr. Smith was. She thought it was because he read so many books. Soon Marjorie wished above all things to learn to read. She would borrow books from the school children and sit down and read and read. Very soon she could read better than any of her playmates. Marjorie took such delight in her books that she wished everybody else could read too, so she formed this plan of teaching very little children how to read. First she made letters out of bits of wood with her knife. She worked and worked until there were 10 sets of the small letters and 6 sets of the large letters. She then made the little tots spell words with her wooden letters. Take the word plum pudding, and who can think of a better one? The first little child picked up the letter P, the next L, the next U, the next M, and so on, until the whole word was spelled. If a child took up a wrong letter, he was to pay a fine or play no more. Each morning, with her basket full of wooden letters, Marjorie went around from house to house. The little children learned to read very fast. The first house she came to was Farmer Wilson's. Marjorie stopped and ran up to the door. Tap, tap, tap. "Who is there?" "Only little Goody 2 Shoes," said Marjorie. "Come to teach Billy." "Is that you, little Goody?" said Mrs. Wilson. "I'm glad to see you." Then out came the little boy. "How do, Doody 2 Shoes?" said he, not being able to speak plainly. Marjorie took little Billy by the hand and led him to a quiet spot under a tree. Then she threw the letters on the ground all mixed up together like this: ZAYWBMPJFXCOQGEKVNIDHRITUS. Billy picked them up, calling each one by its right name, and put them all in just their right places. They now look like this: ABCDEFGHIJKLMNOPQRSTUVWXYZ. Do you think you could have done as well as little Billy? The next place Marjorie came to was Farmer Simpson's. "Bow, wow, wow," said the dog at the door. "Be still, sir," said Mrs. Simpson. "Why do you bark at little 2 Shoes? Come, Alice, here is Goody 2 Shoes ready to teach you." Then out came the little one. "Well, Alice," said 2 Shoes, "have you learned your lesson?" "Yes, indeed I have," said the little one, and taking the letters she formed them in this way: BABEBIBODADEDIDU, FAFEFIFOFU, HAHEHIHOHU. As she formed them, she gave their exact sounds. The next place Marjorie came to was Gaffer Cook's house. Here a number of poor children all came around her at once. These children had been to her school longer than the first little tots and could read words and lines. This is what Marjorie gave them to read. He that will thrive must rise by 5. Truth can be blamed, but cannot be shamed. A friend in your need is a friend indeed. A wise head makes a closed mouth. A lie stands upon one leg, but truth upon 2. A good boy will make a good man. Honor your parents, and the world will honor you. Love your friends, and your friends will love you. At last Marjorie grew up and was given a real school to teach and a real schoolroom to teach in. She still used her little wooden letters and made the children fetch each one to spell the words. One day, as Marjorie was going home from school, she saw some bad boys who had caught a young crow. She went over to them and gave them a penny for the poor little bird, and took him home. Marjorie called the crow Ralph, and under her care he grew into a very fine bird indeed. She even taught him to speak and to pick out a few of the letters. Some time after this, a poor lamb had lost his mother, and the farmer was about to kill him. Marjorie bought him and took him home with her to play with the children. This lamb she called Will, and a pretty fellow he was. The lamb was trained to carry home the books and the slates of the children who behaved well at school. Marjorie also had a present of a little dog. His name was Jumper. Did you ever see a dog with such bright eyes? He almost seems able to talk. Jumper, Jumper, Jumper. He was always playing and jumping about, and Jumper was a good name for him. His place was just outside the door. See how he sits, the saucy fellow? One day Jumper came whining into the schoolroom. He took hold of Marjorie's dress and pulled and pulled. "What do you wish, dear Jumper?" asked Marjorie. But the dog only whined and pulled her toward the door. At last Marjorie went outdoors to see what was the matter. Then Jumper left her and ran back into the schoolroom. He took hold of the dress of one of the little girls and tugged and tugged. At length she too followed Jumper to the door. By this time all the children were on their feet and quickly followed the teacher out of the schoolroom. They were none too soon. The last little girl had hardly passed the door when, with a great crash, the roof fell in. All the children were safe, but what had become of Marjorie's dear books and letters and other things? Marjorie did not lose her school. A rich man who lived near ordered the schoolhouse to be rebuilt at his own expense. Another gentleman, Sir Charles Jones, having heard of Marjorie's good sense, offered her a home if she would teach his daughter. In fact, he finally fell in love with Marjorie, and they were married in the great church. And what do you think? On her wedding day, while the bells were ringing, Marjorie's brother Tommy came home. He had become the captain of a great ship. He had sailed to many lands, and he brought her all kinds of presents. Do you think she deserved to be very happy? She did not forget the children, you may be sure. A house in the village was fitted up as a school, and all the boys and girls were taught to read and write. One step and then another. One step and then another, and the longest walk is ended. One stitch and then another, and the largest rent is mended. One brick upon another, and the highest wall is made. One flake upon another, and the deepest snow is laid. Good night and good morning. A fair little girl sat under a tree, sewing as long as her eyes could see, then smoothed her work and folded it right, and said, "Dear work, good night, good night." Such a number of rooks came over her head crying caw, caw on their way to bed. She said as she watched their curious flight, "Little black things, good night, good night." The horses neighed and the oxen lowed, the sheep's bleat bleat came over the road, all seeming to say with a quiet delight, "Good little girl, good night, good night." She did not say to the sun good night, though she saw him there like a ball of light, for she knew he had God's time to keep all over the world and never could sleep. The tall pink foxglove bowed his head, the violets curtsied and went to bed, and good little Lucy tied up her hair and said on her knees her favorite prayer. And while on her pillow she softly lay, she knew nothing more till again it was day, and all things said to the beautiful sun, good morning, our work has begun."